Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar where we'll talk all about Stacksync and its powerful two-way sync capabilities as a direct replacement to Heroku Connect, as well as many other things such as workflow automations. We recently migrated a large client out of Heroku Connect, and we'd like to show you a quick rundown of what that would more or less look like, while also adding the ability to recalculate the balance of an account's opportunities on the fly. Okay. Before we jump in, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Bosco Domingo. I am a senior software engineer here at Stacksync, and I'll be today's host. And I am accompanied by Alexi and Ruben, who are the CTO and CEO of Stacksync. So go ahead, guys, introduce yourselves.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for hosting. I'm Alexei, CTO and co-founder at Stacksync. And I'm Ruben, co-founder and CEO at Stacksync. So we have been in business already for more than 3 years, building the biggest bi-directional sync, like the market leader. So today we're going to showcase real quick, like how to migrate out of Heroku Connect and I'm migrating Salesforce and Postgres, but Stacksync covers much more than this. For example, connectors such as like NetSuite, HubSpot, Zoho, Oracle DB, Snowflake, BigQuery. So Heroku Connect experience, you're going to be able to replace today. So actually save a lot of cost and gain a lot of performance. You're also going to be able to actually apply to all your entire customer data platform or entire data stack with so many connectors. Yeah. Thank you so much for hosting and having us today, Bosco. For it's yours.
It's a pleasure. That sounds fantastic. It sounds like you can replace not only Heroku Connect, but you can connect to basically anything. So let's go ahead. If you want, let's jump in and just share your screen. We'll guide the people here through what setting up Heroku Connect and connecting to any other data source would look like.
Exactly. So I'm going to share my screen. So just a quick rundown on the architecture today. The very first step to actually replace Heroku Connect is to create a bi-directional sync directly via the Stacksync UI. So once we have a bi-directional sync, all of our Salesforce data will be available for read and write from Postgres. So now you can read all the data in real time, so all fresh data. And anytime you write something into your Postgres at any scale, this will also apply and propagate within milliseconds to actually your Salesforce instance. And as we get these real-time events, Stacksync can also use trigger events to trigger some downstream workflow automations. So for example, you say, if you synchronize all of your accounts and all of your opportunities, you can say, hey, Stacksync, as soon as you see like a new opportunity, which is created or updated, please trigger this workflow. And this workflow is in charge of recalculating the customer lifetime value by summing all opportunities and updating the associated parent contact record. So in my contact record, I'm going to see the sum of all opportunities for that account. So the first step is to create a bi-directional sync. So I'm just going to share my screen and maybe Bosco, you can guide us through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to be building, just as a quick recap, is a small bi-directional sync. So we will have all the data from Heroku all the way to Salesforce and back, which is one of the main differentiators of Stacksync. But also every time that one of those changes, as Ruben mentioned, happens to one of the deals, for example, we can recalculate that value. Okay, we're going to show you how step by step. So first of all, we're going to have our main screen right here, which is our syncs, right? As you can see, we already have one sync, which is between Salesforce and Postgres. But in this case, I believe, Ruben, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be creating a completely new one. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and go for it.
Okay, so now I'm just going to create a new sync. So I just click create a sync and here, so I can see like here you have many apps available. So my first step is going to be to connect my Salesforce. So here in my Salesforce, I'm just going to create, let's say, a new connection just to show how easy it is.
Fantastic. I see you also have multiple options as well. So I guess you can also try out the product with test data and still make it work, correct?
Absolutely. Stacksync also supports with sandboxes. So you can really get started with like your dev environment and your production environment as well.
Oh, fantastic. So we can have people work and start playing around with Stacksync, see if it fits their needs. And if so, then get in contact with us. Is that correct?
Exactly. And then they can move, once they have a sandbox set up, they can also directly go into production with a duplicate of their sync configuration. So they can have the same configuration from dev to production and have as many environments. Perfect.
Okay. So now we're just creating a simple connector to Salesforce. I saw that you used OAuth 2. So all you had to do is log in with your account and that was it, right?
Absolutely. And for Postgres, it's going to be very similar. Here, we just have to enter the credentials of our database supporting SSL, SSH, and API whitelisting. Today, I already pre-configured a connection already. So I'm going to use this one. to make it easier. So today, basically, we're going to have a sync between Salesforce and Postgres. our two apps are now connected. So I will be going to the next step now, which is choosing which tables we want to sync.
Okay. So right now here we have the page with all the potential tables from Salesforce as well as from our Postgres database. I assume there are no automatic matches just in order to not maybe trump any of the data that may exist. But here we can select each one of the tables and we can create a new table. Or if you want to use an existing one, you can still do that. Is that correct?
Exactly, 100%. So actually, we'll be here so you can select all the standard and custom objects and standard and custom fields. Everything is supported. So everything in your Salesforce can be synced. And we have many objects. So Stacksync, as you mentioned,
Fantastic.
Bosco, Stacksync lets you the opportunity to actually map a table which is already existing, like the changelog table. Here I have a database with a changelog table already. But actually, I can also let Stacksync create a new table for me in my database. So Stacksync will create the perfect schema with the perfect data types and perfect column names and everything for me. So I do not even have to configure anything on my database to get started. So it's really like a 2-click process.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, extremely easy. And I also see that you have the option to select if you want bi-directional sync, which is the default. But you can still go with the traditional one-way sync.
Exactly. You can have one-way sync, the other way, or bidirectional sync. Today, we'll synchronize the accounts in bidirectional sync, as well as the opportunities in bidirectional sync. So I'm going to show the case of bidirectional sync, but you can also use one-way sync as you please, depending on your use case.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to remove the cameras on the bottom left. So that way, because I think everyone will still see us on the webinar option. So you can just,
100%.
much easier. Thank you.
So here we have really now I've selected 2 tables. And the
Mhm.
next step for me is just to go for
The
each
field
table,
themselves,
I
right?
detail and select which field I want to sync. So for every table, we can see balance, and here we can see opportunities. I can actually really choose which column I want to sync. For example, let's say here, forecast category, maybe it's not something which is important to me. I'm just going to choose not to sync it. Right. So I can really choose which fields I can sync or not. And here I can see all the fields just for tables, standard custom fields are supported.
And in this case, because we are using Salesforce, the connector is intelligent enough to detect that some of the fields are read-only. So you won't be able to write data from your Postgres instance into the Salesforce one. And we'll see what that looks like if we try it. But the idea is that some fields we're not in control of. Salesforce has restrictions on them. So we respect those restrictions. So your data stays consistent with what Salesforce allows. That's very important because otherwise we could be breaking systems, and that's something that we obviously do not want. So we make it very clear which fields you can change and which ones you can't.
100%. This is exactly what happens. So on this, basically, we can also go to the next step,
Yeah, that's correct.
which is basically creating the sync. Once we have chosen which tables we want to sync and which fields we want to sync, now for each table, you can just click create a base. So
In this case, base and sync, they're basically synonymous, right?
a base and a sync is the exact same thing. Actually, like the actually sync is a new name of what we
Mhm.
previously called it.
I see.
Good.
Oh, what a nice name, the ultimate sync.
Yeah, exactly. The ultimate thing. This is like a default name. You can actually sync so for example, let's say we can see Heroku Connect alternative.
Right. So you can always change the name as well. That's brilliant.
You can change
Fantastic.
the name anytime.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Today, basically, we have a sync. So now Stacksync already created some tables in my database. So now if I go into my database and I refresh my schema, I have some tables here appearing. So now just my schema is refreshing my IDE. So I can see I
Yep.
have
And
an
there we see.
account, an opportunity just to
Yep.
read. If I open up one of these tables, I can see, okay, my data is syncing. And here I can see in my best statistics that we are detecting some data. Okay, so here
I
we have
think
like,
the sync is it still paused? Did you?
yeah, actually I turned the sync on. So
Oh,
once you have created a sync, here you have to turn the sync on so the data will start being synced. So here you can see, okay, we have 21 accounts in our database and 4 opportunities. Here
fantastic.
I could see from my statistics here. So if I just
Mhm.
refresh, yeah, like we're gonna have 21 on both sides. So now
Yep.
data is really syncing. It's real time. The Stacksync scales to millions of records, right? The sync speed is up to 1 million records per minute. So here I can see my accounts. I have 21 accounts and I have some opportunities too. Here I should have some 4 opportunities. So I also have 4 opportunities here. So it's perfect. Now
Right.
I would say where my database is fully aligned with my CRM data.
Correct. So now we have Postgres and Salesforce basically mirroring each other. What if we want
Yes.
to go ahead and go to the next step, right? Let's say I now want to do a small change here in Postgres to see if that actually does reflect back into Salesforce. Could we do that?
Absolutely. So here I'm going to create a new sync. So here I'm going to say Heroku Connect alternative, right? Let's say this is like a new prospect or something, a new account. I'm just going to create a new account here. Once I've created my Postgres, I just go back into my Salesforce and I just refresh here this table.
Okay. All right.
But here, if
And
I
now
see,
we should see
uh,
the new account. Is that correct?
yeah, Heroku, exactly. Heroku
There
Connect
it is.
alternative,
Yeah.
here it's already here. So notice that now, like here, you do not have the ID because when you created the record, you didn't get the Salesforce ID immediately. Just refresh. Stacksync maintains a full consistency between the two apps. We have the ID from Salesforce, which feedback from Salesforce to Postgres when we created the record in from Postgres to Salesforce. So when the record got
Right.
in Salesforce, we got an ID, the ID got feedback. So here it's really as well as all the fields such as system timestamp and stuff like this. So we have
And those are the read-only fields that we mentioned before. That's one example where all of that will be set by Salesforce.
exactly. It can be read-only fields, but also managed fields, such as like fields which can be modified, like for
Mhm.
example default values, but then which you can modify later on. So it's read-only
Mhm.
fields and system
I see.
fields.
I see.
Right.
Fantastic. All right.
So
So now that we've seen a change, right, from Postgres all the way to Salesforce, and we saw that Salesforce not only registered it, but it added all the info that it needed for it to work, and that went back to Postgres. So really, we have everything that we need in this case to go ahead and maybe create a new opportunity for this account.
absolutely. And here, I'm also going to modify this account directly here. I'm going to say, let's say, okay, it's like a partner, right? For example,
Mhm. Right.
actually, if I save in Salesforce, so here Stacksync will directly detect the change immediately. So if I go into my database and I actually refresh up like here, actually I can see like here I have a partner. So it's really extremely
All right.
fast on both sides, right?
Yep.
So here, for example, here I can mention this company now is called OpenAI. It's one of my prospects. For example, I just click OpenAI here, and OpenAI should just reflect next to the record should just be refreshed here. So here you can see OpenAI.
Yeah, I can see it. Number 12.
OpenAI is a partner.
There it is. There it is. All right.
Really,
So
really
full screen,
fast.
everything works.
Totally. So now basically what's going to happen is that we see that we have a few opportunities for our account, right? So now
Okay.
what we want to say is that, okay, now when I create some opportunities, I have an amount for every opportunity. And I want to say, okay, I want to sum the sum of opportunities here. And I want to display it in the field description, for example, of my CRM, right? So actually
Right.
I want to
So, yep.
bypass what I would normally built into a third-party workflow automation platform, workflow automation tooling, or Salesforce flows, right? Salesforce flows are very limited, very hard to manage. You have to hire consultants to actually build this. And Stacksync is really, with the bi-directional sync, making it super easy to build workflow. So now in the
Okay.
next few minutes, we're going to see how to say, okay, every time I see an opportunity which is created, I want to sum the total amount of the opportunities for that same account. And I will update the account here based on the account ID.
Okay. Sound good.
So very easy. What we're going to do here is that we're going to say, I'm going to create a trigger, right?
Okay. So
So
let's go back to Stacksync and then go
I
into
go in,
workflow automation. Is that correct?
yes. So I go into my workflow automation tooling. So before the workflow automation tooling, we're just going to create a trigger, which is going to trigger this workflow. So we're going to
Right.
say,
Makes
for
sense.
example, let's say every time I'm going to create a new trigger, and every time a new record is created or updated on table opportunity, and the change comes from Salesforce, Postgres, or just any app, the execute the change when it's written into destination. So you're sure to have the data available at destination, here in our case in Postgres. And here you can add any filtering. You can add any filtering. For example, let's say amount is a field that changed, right? Or something like this. You can really have any type of
Conditions.
right? Yeah, I'm just
Right.
going to
Yeah.
remove the
And it would make sense in this case, right? If we wanted to make sure that, hey, we don't want to trigger this workflow every time. We just want to trigger it if the amount has changed, because it could be that we're changing opportunities all the time. That could be something that happens quite often. And we don't want to trigger the workflow every time. We just want it if the amount has changed, because then we know that we have to recalculate. So that gives us a lot of granularity in the ability to decide what changes and what triggers changes and what doesn't.
absolutely. And every time we have this change, this will trigger either an HTTP call, which is going to be our workflow in our
Okay.
case, or a database query directly. So in our case, we could actually implement both, but like here, we're going to see our workflow because workflows are extremely flexible. And you can also add some additional processing, not only your SQL queries, but also like a Python data cleaning in JavaScript or
Mm.
in Python, some Slack notifications, etc.
And they assume as well that a database query only works with databases, whereas with Salesforce, they may make you go through an API because they want to limit or rate limit or be able to measure something. So it won't necessarily be compatible with all connectors, the database query. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Database query is compatible with all database connectors, right? So here, for example,
Mhm.
you could trigger a query into your Snowflake instance. Sorry. So here I just have one database, but like here you could trigger a database into your Snowflake instance based on a change which happens between Salesforce and Postgres, right? So it's
I see.
really super flexible. However, here we're just gonna create a new workflow. So
Okay.
now if I go to the next step, now I have all my featuring and trigger which is configured. I'm just gonna go into my workflow and I'm gonna say, okay, I'm going to create a new workflow, and this workflow is going to be aggregate opportunity amount, right?
Okay. So in this workflow, what we're going to do is that summing that we mentioned before. We're going to take the data from either Salesforce or Postgres, whatever may have changed, and do the new sum to display that description to the updated value. Is that correct?
Exactly. So in my workflow, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take as an input, I'm going to take what we call the record, right? So actually the entire record, which has been updated is going to be an object and it's required. And I'm going to add as well changes, right? Which is also an
And that
object, right?
that
So
record and those changes, where did they come from?
So these elements actually they come from our trigger. So either work in a Stacksync trigger. So here I'm going to copy paste the call request, which is going to trigger this workflow, which is already pre-configured. Every time which I actually make a request, actually Stacksync gives me the opportunity to extract the record. And so with the entire record that changed, as well as the changes. So here in the second JSON, I'm going to actually have only the field that changed. So if you have a record with 100 fields, but only the name changed, in the changes, you're only going to get the name.
The name itself. I see. So this gives us again another chance to decide what data to act on and what not. And I assume that in this case, because we've set up the filter, the changes will always have the amount.
Exactly. Correct. Because amount always needs to be a field that changed. So this is also a very particular feature that Stacksync enables you to have. Is that normally like Salesforce triggers, etc., they only tell you this record changed, but not necessarily which field in that record changed.
See.
And Stacksync gives you both information, which record and also the precise data which changed within that record, which fields, right? So now that actually I have my trigger created, I'm just going to create my trigger, right? So now I expect to always have basically my workflow, which is created. And
Okay.
on trigger, I'm going to create the first step of my workflow is going to be to execute a query. And this query is going to be actually like a simple query, which I prepared, with ChatGPT. Very easy, right? It's going to be aggregate, aggregate opportunity amount, right?
Okay. So
And
what we're going to be doing the actual calculations, right?
yes, exactly. So update account with aggregate opportunity amount. So here I select my connection. So it's going to go into my Postgres database and I'm going to paste my query. This query is a very simple query, which just tells you that you're going to be updating the account table with it on the description field, what we have said before, on the description field, where with the amount, where basically, and the amount is actually taken from the sum of amounts in the opportunities table.
Oh, yeah, I see. I see.
Yeah. So I'm just going to save. And that should be a workflow which is working. So now if I go into my opportunities and I'm going to create a new opportunity, very easy. I'm going to say, okay, close date. I'm going to create a new random close date, new opening ideal account.
So this is just the usual Salesforce workflow where you just create the new account, the new opportunities, and you just update everything. I see.
Exactly.
We
So
have the account name, we have the stages, we have everything. And then we have the field that we're very interested in, which is the amount. Right? In this case, let's say 4,000. Okay. So now we have a case where we have a new deal, a new opportunity with a 4,000, in this case, Swiss francs price tag. I
exactly.
assume that
So
now Stacksync will have detected all the changes and updated the description. Is that correct?
Exactly. So now if I go into my opportunities table, I will see that the opportunity got created. Perfect.
Right. Yep.
Super fast.
Correct.
I have $4,000. Now, if I go into my sync, okay, so now basically the sync has been triggered. So here I can see in my sync have the past triggers. I'm going to have an opportunity with a new deal. So I'm going to be able to see a JSON, right? A new OpenAI deal, right? With $4,000.
Right. And that's where we see the record. We can see the
Exactly.
changes. So we can go into history and pinpoint specific changes individually. It's brilliant.
Exactly. And here I can see that my workflow really executed. I can see the entire history of the past executions of my workflows. So here it took 944 milliseconds. So it's less than a second for the entire workflow to complete. I have all my data, and actually the query in my Postgres, my query executed. So that's pretty much what happened. And
Okay.
what I have here, I go into my database, I go into my accounts. If I refresh, I'm going to see that in my OpenAI deal, I have $4,000. And
I see.
what I can do. Oh, yeah. This is very fast. So now actually what I can do, I can also create a second opportunity for the second account, right? So here, for example, large OpenAI deal, I'm just going to put anything. And as amount, I'm going to put, let's say 10,000, right?
Okay. So we're creating a new deal right from Postgres. Instead of going to Salesforce, we're inserting a new row. We're obviously communicating that back to Salesforce, but that will
Yes.
also trigger the execution of the workflows, right? To recalculate that description. So the description should be updated now to 14,000 Swiss francs.
Yes, exactly. So actually, I'm checking here if we have created the opportunity. So large OpenAI deal, account ID 10,000, probably. I think
Yeah, you need probability and you need
I need to
close
put
date as
parity.
well. Yeah.
And the
I
close
think
date
this is
also, yeah.
probably
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really good instance now to show the issues, right? This issue should have probably shown up in your
Before
issues.
it
Yeah,
disappears.
there we go.
Oh, perfect. Required field was missing close date. So now I just added close date like a second ago, just committed. So actually now if I refresh, I have actually, so Stacksync like me that it could not sync my Postgres opportunity into Salesforce because I was missing a required field, right? So now that I corrected it, my data is not lost. I could just go manually, just fix my data. And once my data has been fixed, boom, I have it here. And now I should have actually the updated $14,000.
There we go. There we go.
So this is really to showcase as soon as I fix the error, the entire workflow restarted without actually losing any bit of the process, right? So it's not that you have silent issues, etc. So actually, I also received an email just now. I just saw an email on my phone that there was an issue.
No.
Yeah, I'm actually alerted in real time about these issues, right? So the entire workflow actually processes in real time. So we can really see here that it's an extremely powerful process, right? That I'm going to put like a huge OpenAI deal. I'm going to put, let's say, 200,000, right? For example. Yeah, 200,000. And I'm going to create a new opportunity. And this entire workflow really happens in real time. So here I can see no more issues because anyway, I created this. And now if I go back.
So the issue was also auto-deleted right after it detected that we had fixed the problem in the root. So without actually having to address that issue individually, Stacksync was smart enough to detect, hey, they've already fixed it. No need to keep this in the list.
Yes, and to go back to these issues, it's not only when you have a missing field required, but also when you have data validation issues or something. For example, here I'm going to modify a field which is managed by Salesforce. So let's say if I'm going to try to modify this ID field, that's what it's going to tell you.
We said cannot be modified. Okay.
It cannot be modified, right? Because Salesforce manages the ID on their own. So if I go into my issues table, I should see immediately that the following columns are not right. So Stacksync gives me all the details, such as the record IDs on both platforms to identify and to go and fix a record. I know it's an update with this ID, and I have a detailed error message. What's very important is that here Stacksync gives me some instant actions which are available to me, such as ignore the issue, retry the sync, or revert the change. Very important. So when I click reverse the change, Stacksync will go into Salesforce, cherry pick that value which was important to me, and then go back into my database and reverse the change. So Stacksync does not store any of your data, right? So this is very important to understand. So how could we actually revert the data to its previous value if we don't store the data? Because Stacksync went to Salesforce, cherry picked that value. So the fact that Postgres had an incorrect value did not mean that we lost the value entirely because the Salesforce was still having the correct value into its system. So then we could actually go and query that value without having to store it, a history of it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really powerful then. Because in the case that we try to do one of these changes that is not valid, whether it's a human mistake or an automated mistake, we can still go ahead and revert to a state that we know is correct and we don't lose any data in the process.
Absolutely. And we can see here that actually we have like our entire workflow automations, which actually are logged. So I can see and can also replay them in case there was an issue and I want to replay it. This is very convenient. I want to also showcase here a bit more about the workflow automations, right? For example, let's say every time that you have, let's say, a change which is made on a table, you want, let's say, for compliance, you want to log every change that happens, right? This is Salesforce makes it very hard for you to actually store, retrieve, and operate on these events. Especially also if you want to sort of like a detailed history of all the updates, not only for compliance, but just because like you want to do some analytics and analyze what's the progress of your pipeline in real time.
This is a very common use case where you need to be able to access the history of a record. You need to know that what changed, when, what triggered it, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to have that traceability. Is that something that Stacksync can allow us to do?
Yes, 100%. So actually, this is one of very common use cases of our clients, right? Is to take the advantage of loading all of this data into a changelog table. For example, here we're going to repeat exactly what we did before, such as, for example, let's say every time, so I'm going to create a new workflow for this, right? I think here we should be into workflows. So here I'm going to say log changes into changelog table.
Okay. You do that. I also want to mention that many of these platforms do not allow you to save change logs for more than 90 days or 30 days, sometimes even. So you need to do something yourself, hiring a team that will build that data pipeline to do all of that, extract all that data. However, the platform decides that data can be accessed can be really complicated and really expensive, not only in terms of money, but just in time, in headaches. So we've built all the pipelining and all the dirty plumbing, as we like to call it, so that you don't have to do any of that. You just simply connect to it, build a workflow, and say, hey, every time that something changes, go ahead and log it. And that's it. And it's as
100%.
simple as a 5-minute action.
Exactly. So here in this case, it's going to be a very simple action. Is every time you receive a record and a change from your data, from your sync, right? You can just go into Postgres and insert a record. So here is like insert record into changelog table. And here I'm going to say, okay, here I'm going to select my connection, table name changelog. Is it correct? Yeah, my table name is called changelog. And here I'm just going to add, let's say, the data which I received from
the trigger. Okay, so we have the
record.
record, we have the changes, so we can access those and save those as we receive them. And we could even modify them, right? If we wanted to anonymize data, or if we wanted to maybe subtract some data that we don't even want to be logged, we could do that. And we can also do changes to that data as well. We could add extra fields that may not be in the record itself, but we may want to add like a time of receival or who approved it, things that we may want to calculate or to add after the fact that may not be in the raw data that we can extract from somewhere else, right? That is also an option. That's what the capabilities of being able to build workflows like this gives you, right? You're able to write your own code and do as many things as you want within the workflow.
Absolutely. So here I could do, for example, some data cleaning in Python, as you just mentioned, right? In Python or in any other language. And here I just put my data right here. I write like San Francisco, and this should be just like, and this Python code will actually execute every time. And actually I could use it somewhere, etc. Right? So really powerful features. So now I'm just going to copy paste this trigger. And as before, I'm just going to paste it here and create a new trigger, right? So every time log any change on accounts table, right? So every time there is a record created, updated, or deleted on table accounts, the change comes from any app. So every change is, if the change is based on Salesforce or Postgres, I just want to log it, no filtering. So I log everything. And sure, I'm just going to be doing something like this, right? Pasting my request. And sure, I'm going to be using, record and change. Boom. And I'm going to use the Postgres labels and just create my sync. So now I just create my sync. So if I just, okay, now the sync has been created. So every time now I go into my accounts table, very easy. I just create, let's say, a new deal, Anthropic, just to say into AI,
Yeah, and on the top.
just Anthropic. I just created one record. This is my IDE. And now basically what's going to happen is that this trigger is going to log.
And we're going to log the fact that we added a new record to our accounts table. Is that correct?
Yeah, into our changelog table. Yeah. So
Yep.
here we can see the record has been here. So this is a first pass, right? So just Postgres created it. And now if we just refresh, we should have like exactly a second record because we created first a record into Postgres and into Salesforce. And then like
Right.
Salesforce
We saw before that Salesforce added all that extra data that it needed and it sent it back to Postgres. So this is what we're seeing right here.
Exactly. We can see all the changes like auto managed field. So if I go back here, I should see the update also appearing here. And this works even if you modify. So now if I go to my opportunities, here I can refresh. And actually I'm going to duplicate this deal. And here I'm going to say, let's say new Anthropic.
So we're going
field.
to link it to the Anthropic account, and that way we're
Exactly.
going to see all the data also being
So
changed.
100%. I take my account here. I'm going to write here the account ID of Anthropic and I just create. And now basically they should create a new deal of 200,000, pretty much like the data. Like
So we should see that in the changelog, we have obviously the new deal being created, all the data that Postgres sent to Salesforce, the data that Salesforce sent to Postgres, as well as the change to the account's description. Is that correct? That should be like the entirety of the changes that we see in the changelog.
Absolutely. So here, if I check Anthropic, I see 200,000. And now if I go to my changelog table,
Right.
I can see new deal, a new update has been done from Salesforce. So here I can see, okay, which field has really been changed, right? And that's pretty much it. Like before, we update in Postgres because of our workflow and then Salesforce replies. And you can create some more complex architectures. We have just actually released a new guide for real-time and two-way sync enterprise system guide, co-author with the founders of Supabase and Coalesce as well, which is a very big Snowflake data transformation company, and Supabase is a Postgres provider. So, which actually this database runs on Supabase itself. It means this Postgres database runs on Supabase itself for today's demo. We actually feature a lot of different architectures, which can be adopted with two-way sync, triggers, and workflow automations. This was like a quick demo how you can actually replace Heroku Connect with a drop-in replacement with no downtime on your side, and also get more performance, more real-time performance, more scalability, save on cost, and also add a top-up of triggers and workflow automation on top of it, or in the same tooling.
So all of it in the same package. Go ahead and
Exactly. We have seen like many customers migrating out of Heroku Connect these days, like moving especially to Amazon RDS. Like it's really, there's a massive movement currently for like cost reasons, many reasons. And what we have seen a lot in the market is that many companies that were using Heroku Connect product, so this on Heroku connecting the Salesforce data, now they didn't have any product to synchronize the Salesforce data into the Postgres. So some of them try to do internally, right? But the point is that these customers are enterprise customers that need like critical, like robustness. Like it's like critical use cases that they have built on top of this data over the years. It's not only analytical, it's really operational. So the point is that they started to build in-house all this integration, right? But they couldn't reach like an operational level, like a level of reliability that was sufficient. And that's why they're coming to Stacksync today. Like they tried for several months to build, and now they moved to Stacksync. And as we have been able to show today, like Stacksync enabled your company to have like variable, critical sync between your Salesforce data and your Postgres data as a real built-in replacement of Heroku Connect that you can upload on your RDS and on any Postgres database out there, on Supabase too. Like it's built-in replacement.
Really powerful and really almost configuration free. It was just doing a couple clicks here and there and writing the two workflows that we saw were extremely simple, very simple SQL code, and just a bunch of just two updates. And all of that already gave us an incredible set of abilities, right? That I assume that with Heroku Connect would either be a lot more cumbersome to set up and probably a lot more costly.
Exactly. It would take at least a week to just set up and just go through the documentation. Stacksync really is like a fully no-code, low-code tool. And with work automation on top of it, it becomes extremely powerful, not only bidirectional sync, but as well as data transformations and automation on top of it. So that was really like an opportunity for cost savings and as well as upgrading of your infrastructure very easily and with the best support you could ever get in the entire industry.
Absolutely. I think that really sums up all the value that we provide with the product. I think anyone who sees this will be, it's obvious how incredible
Yeah.
this tool is. And I hope that you guys really enjoyed it. I hope that it was easy to follow as well. Feel free to get in touch with us. We're easy to contact. We have it. You can find us on LinkedIn. Ruben and Alexei will be very happy to answer any of your questions. I will be as well. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just type in Stacksync on the search bar. We should be the only company. Feel free to get in contact with us, reach out. And if you have any questions or you want to see a specific use case for your specific company, then feel free to reach out. I don't know if there's any closing words that you guys want to share with the public. And if not, I think we can let this end.
That was it for me.
Yeah,
All
but let's go. Looking forward to see your stack.
Let's go.
Perfect. All right. I hope everyone had a fantastic time and we will see you on the next one.
Have an amazing day. Ciao.